And frankly, how do we also understand what we can let go of measuring, because we can understand what's real and what's not, and where investment and cost makes sense versus where it doesn't. Like as a client, I'm just not able to accept some of the billings that we would have even 5 or 10 years ago, because we are seeing both internally from Plus Company, but other partners just getting more efficient at it.
In an ever-changing world that's all about staying connected, building connections, and seeing where the next collaboration takes a marketing campaign. From an initial brief to the follow-through, what paths are going to make a campaign success more than a possibility? Hi, I'm Brett Marchand, CEO of Plus Company. This is Partners in Possibility. As the digital landscape continues to expand, obtaining crucial data from niche markets becomes progressively costly and challenging. In the pursuit of maximizing return on marketing investment, or ROMI, marketers focus their efforts on crafting campaigns that not only meet consumer needs and expectations, but also generate profit margins. In this episode, Kristin Wozniak, SVP of Customer Success at Plus Company, and Andrew Rusk, VP Marketing at Coast Capital Savings, delve into the pivotal role played by AI in the quest to maximize ROMI. Together, we discuss how AI accelerates the content creation process, affording marketers more time and resources to concentrate on quantifying and measuring the brand's impact. We'll also provide an exclusive sneak peek into Plus Company's groundbreaking innovation, AIOS. This remarkable tool seamlessly connects all touch points in your marketing strategy, continuously monitors creative performance, and empowers your business to thrive in the digital age. Stay tuned to discover how AIOS can unlock what's possible in your marketing endeavors and redefine success. Andrew, maybe I start with you. You're a marketer. You've actually, interestingly, been on both sides, both the agency side and the marketing side. Maybe talk a little bit about the challenges that, as a marketer, that you face and that marketers in general face when it comes to figuring out, how do you spend your budget? How do you figure out what's working and what's not working and why that's important?
Thanks, Brett. One of the largest challenges that my team and I have always had is making sure that we're grounding our strategies and our business in outcomes. And outcomes that ladder up to the board scorecards of the businesses that we are driving. So starting with the board KPIs, how do we make sure we understand measurement frameworks down from there in terms of what are the key drivers that we need to activate and pull in order to help our businesses grow? And as you get further down into the business, understanding and being able to measure the effectiveness of that becomes fuzzier and harder. And so as we can get better on media measurement, that of course allows us to make better calls in terms of having better outcomes at the bottom, so that we can have better conversations as we figure out where to prioritize investments at the top of the organization.
And do you do post-analysis on campaigns or ongoing analysis to figure out,
Oh, absolutely. Analytics and data is a core part of our business. So within my team, we have an analytics and measurement and insights team and function. And not only that, but we also tie that data into the larger data lake that we run as an organization in order to make sure that we are combining the insights that we are able to glean from our marketing communication strategies to inform larger insights on what is working versus not.
Right. And I presume that one of the challenges, because it's true for every brand and every marketer, is how do you allocate and or put priority against building the Coast Capital brand, in order to welcome people into the brand of the community that's Coast Capital, but then also how do you allocate to actually drive conversion and outcomes, as you say, to get people to sign up for a new account and or get a credit card or get a mortgage with you. It's
right, but everything should be driving outcomes, Brett. And I think that one of the challenges in the media industry we've had is not having the confidence, not having the talent oftentimes both on the client side as well as on the agency side, and not having the data in order to advocate for the role that advertising has at creating margin, right? When we get right down to the role that as brand builders we all serve, this isn't about selling products. It is about creating brands and experiences and margin creation that can help consumers fulfill needs and experiences. And you work with lots of clients that do that in the private sector in order for the outcomes to just be making money. But we also do that in terms of thinking about what the social purpose ends are as one of Canada's largest B Corps. And so like us thinking about how those pieces connect is critical and core to our business. Because I think that too often, one, we don't understand the basics of marketing effectiveness and marketing science in order to build those cases internally, where this isn't something that can just live with a department in an agency or a specialist on a team. The foundations need to be part of our practice as marketers, as an industry, in terms of like level setting and upskilling on the talents that, like, if my CEO is asking me to defend a business case, I can't be talking about bullshit like share of heart or brand love, as opposed to the outcomes that I'm driving and how the work that I'm building is contributing to contributors of preference and choice that is driving my P&L.
Yeah, well, you could probably talk about those things, but you might not be the VP of marketing for much longer, which is always the challenge. Speaking of measurement tools, Kristin, how do you think the evolution of the digital landscape is impacting how these models are being used? Because I know you're doing this work with clients every day.
I mean, a lot. I think there's a number of things that have happened in the measurement space in the last couple of years that impact it. But I want to take, I think, a step back to set something up to explain where I'm going, which is fundamentally right now in the world we live in, especially when it comes to everything with marketing, if you can't measure it, it very rarely gets priority status, whatever it is.
Right.
So whether it's something like regions, measurement right now in Canada especially prioritizes national. And then if you get to provincial level, you get BC, Ontario. And when you get in BC and Ontario, you get Toronto and Vancouver. That's it. And fundamentally the city level, a lot of measurement lives at Vancouver, Toronto, Ottawa, if you're lucky, Edmonton, Calgary, Montreal. That's it. And apparently the Maritimes don't matter at all. And the reason for that, of course, is a lot of these smaller regions are 20,000, 30,000, 100,000 people. Having any kind of measurement in those markets is incredibly expensive, and the ROI on that investment isn't there for people who run measurement programs. So, Andrew, we talk a lot about local news. We talk a lot about, supporting the regionality of Canada. Measurement doesn't exist in that way, which makes it really, really, really hard. And that goes for a collection of different things. It goes for regionality, it goes for EDI, it goes for TV and offline channels, which I'll come back to. It goes to brand versus performance. It's way easier to measure the impact of performance or lower funnel media than upper funnel media. And so all of these things kind of get the short shrift when it comes to what we prioritize and where we put our dollars. Because if you can measure it, it's way easier to justify putting your dollars behind it. I would say one of the things that's happened is, especially with, our Google and Meta and our Apple friends across the board, they control so much of the digital data, and that digital data informs so much of the measurement and the modeling and whatnot. So over time, everything that they're running is prioritizing their inventory and their channels. And it's not a malicious thing. That's the data that they have, and they use it and they share it. So I know you're asking about the digital evolution, but for me, the biggest thing is just that as the digital world continues to become bigger and bigger and bigger, and actually that conversation even between analog and digital is like, what's digital versus analog anymore anyway? It's the priority continues to be consistently always, how do we use digital more effectively? And that's the thing that's the biggest impact for me. I mean, even there's obviously a million different ways to talk about it, but that's the thing that comes up consistently. It has been for the last 10, 15 years, and it's just getting worse.
Yeah. And we talk a lot about bias and brand protection, et cetera. I mean, let's be honest. These massive digital media players are biased towards spending on their platforms, right?
So weird, right?
I'm always shocked at how often giving more money to platforms is going to solve all of my business problems. Right. As we look at the power of AI over the course of the last 6 months in terms of what it's going to offer in terms of processing and synthesizing the patterns and the correlations in different sets of data, I think we're just at the beginning of this incredible time of saying, how is there incredible efficiency in how we measure? How is there incredible integration as how we measure? And frankly, how do we also understand what we can let go of measuring, because we can understand what's real and what's not, and where investment and cost makes sense versus where it doesn't? And I think that as we do that, and we look to the other opportunities where AI will accelerate pace in terms of, you think about content production, and creative asset production as well, more from a production side, how does that open up additional time for us to return as an industry to what we have always been about, which is about being able to measure and quantify the impact of brand on business.
The other interesting thing about AI, especially for a brand and a company like Coast Capital, is as it gets more powerful, one of the powers of AI should be sometime in the future also helping consumers make decisions to choose you over, one of your competitors.
I think AI in helping to help consumers choose preferences makes a lot of, it has so much opportunity. As a social purpose company in B Corp, we look at AI as a much larger opportunity, though, because if you look at OpenAI as a company, as a capped profit company that is ultimately designed in this world of, if artificial general intelligence is able to deliver on the promises that it might be able to deliver, what does that mean to work? What does that mean to dignity of contribution in society? And what's fascinating is the way that OpenAI is structured is as a capped profit, in order to theoretically be able to start fueling a conversation on universal basic income if that technology is successful. So as a social purpose B Corp in the banking industry, we care very, very deeply about how that integration connects. And one of my largest concerns, Brett, and one of the places where I think the Plus Company and Coast and other clients that we're working on, is making sure that we are advocating that Canada becomes a country where we are known for the things that come out of our heads, not just the things that come out of the ground. How we make sure that AI is an ignition and a fuel for growth and for Canadian businesses and industries, it's so much deeper than saying, is my digital media working? And I think that there's a real opportunity as we realize efficiencies in a lot of the places that have been core to the traditional P&Ls of the agency model, where, like, as a client, I'm just not able to accept some of the billings that we would have even 5 or 10 years ago, because we are seeing both internally from Plus Company, but other partners just getting more efficient at it. How do we find those opportunities to reset our ambition on what brands can accomplish together into the future? Sorry, that was a bit of a rant.
No. Here, I agree. That's an interesting pivot point to talk about the consumer, I think, and tracking customer journey, understanding customer preference, understanding, how they go about their purchase journey, I think is one of the really interesting futures that I think our industry and marketers are going to go in. What are some of the biggest hurdles at taking a consumer journey approach to marketing, advertising products and brands versus the sort of MMM top down or, last touch, multi-touch attribution up approach?
I think the first thing is comfort and familiarity. We've developed a collection of approaches to measurement and thinking that are very much ingrained in the way we work now. And I'd say the number one conversation I have when it comes to AI, or even just changing or improving or introducing a new form of measurement, is, hold on, but I haven't seen this before. So one of the things is just fear. And a lot of KPIs and OKRs are based on the measurement systems that work. So it's like, hold on, you want us to talk now about a consumer journey in a different way, but I've anchored all of my objectives on this, and, my budget depends on this, my bonus depends on this, right? And that's something that the digital world did for sure, and this is something that I'm incredibly passionate about, is it equated a digital ID with a human being. And your device ID is not you. It's a representation of you or some of the things that you do. But humans are far more than their web activity. Humans are full of biases and contradictions. They're unpredictable. They make illogical choices all the time. And so the measurement that we have in place right now as an industry doesn't really allow for that. And even when we get away from MTA or last touch, and then you move into the MMM world, which is meant to be a little bit more cohesive and more representative in theory, the assumptions that go along with an MMM, the people-based assumptions, are kind of crummy. Things like it assumes that that every person reacts the same way to a channel. So we're all going to react the same way to TV. It assumes that the channel will always operate the same way. So TV will always have this effectiveness and this efficiency. And then it also assumes that will never change. So, all three of us are going to react to TV in this way, and we're going to always continue to react to TV in this way. So that's also not how people operate. So I think one of the real beauties of moving towards AI and a true consumer journey is to actually start to honor the nuances that make us people and integrate that into the way that brands can actually connect with people. Because the way in which we're working now creates homogeneity in personas, and it, can reinforce stereotypes. It doesn't allow for all of those things that actually make us us. So looking more at the consumer journey, I think, in a way where we actually start with the person first, and a real, actual for real person first, not the other ways we've talked about it in the past, will allow us to start to explore and connect with different people in the ways that's actually meaningful, and get away from this, environment that feels very stale. I think, and that's our role. A colleague of mine talks about, media agencies are in fact agents of media. And when I think of it that way, I'm like, we have a huge responsibility here in terms of the content messaging that goes out into the world. We can do better, and we should. And looking at people is a real easy way to start that. Sorry, that's my rant, Andrew.
It was great.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk more about the 4-quadrant strategy that Coast Capital utilizes to modernize their business through a technology-first lens. Welcome back to Partners in Possibility. I'm Brett Marchand. Coast Capital's quadrant strategy is their internal guide that anchors the facilitation of the end-to-end delivery of member needs during the consumer journey. Let's listen in.
So when we built our 5-year strategy in 2020, we built our strategy around consumer journeys and understanding consumer needs that we wanted to experience and fulfill upon. And really, we viewed this as us extending our spirit as a cooperative and what that means into the 21st century, in terms of if we've always been in the business of empathizing and understanding the needs of the unserved and the undermet, then how do we do that moving forward in terms of modernizing our business from a technology first lens into the future? And so what we did is we actually categorized our entire business into 4 different quadrants that we use as we frame everything that we do internally: manage, save, plan, and borrow. And of course, there's a series of products and experiences that help fulfill those needs that are around that. But then from there, we've actually built out core journeys and anchor points that help facilitate those journeys along as well, in terms of how that continues to work. So we look at journeys in terms of end-to-end delivery of a member need. And then within that, we look at the fulfillment of it in terms of how we deliver that from an employee and a member experience. And then within that, we look at how we execute on digital pushes and pulls and messages and integrations and moments of magic as well, in terms of how we can complement and help nudge those journeys along. And while we do 2 things in that process, we of course have the teams that empathize and with the needs of the consumers and the employees to map those journeys in terms of mapping what those digital experiences and touch points look like. And we have Salesforce teams internally that help us execute those, and we work with Cassette in order to help execute that from a media perspective as well. But the other piece that as marketers and communicators in the org, we've also helped to to drive is saying, how do we help facilitate that change internally in terms of what that orientation can do, and what that orientation can do in order to improve the efficiency of how the organization is running, how that transition can improve engagement within our teams, as well as, of course, how that transition can help our members that we are serving as well. I think that too often we get really, really focused on the members without allocating sufficient time or even credit to ourselves in terms of what we can do and need to do if we want to drive more holistic business outcomes and end to end as marketers.
The power of AI is that you could create a customer journey for every single member and every single prospective member, right? Without violating PII and personal data and privacy for every single person that's currently a member of Coast Capital and or you think could be a prospective member of Coast Capital. How would AI create, fill in those gaps?
That's a big question. I think there's lots of ways. I mean, one of the ways that we're doing it right now is using synthetic data. Think about, this is the example I always use. Brett, you're probably tired of me hearing it or me saying it, but think of the most complicated game of SimCity you've ever seen, right? You take, 36 million little Sims and put them across Canada, or close to 400 million in states, and those little Sims you've trained to operate and think, to do all the things that your population would do. And now suddenly there's not me, I'm not in this data set, but there's someone who looks a lot like me in this data set who does what I do. And that's how we can start to bring together all these different data sets and create populations using AI. The medical industry, for example, relies heavily on synthetic data because they can create data sets essentially that mimic and track, say, spreads of diseases or how different people might respond to different types of medications or vaccines. So they'll use it, for example, a lot in things like children's medicine, because you don't want to be doing those experiments necessarily on kids, but you need to have a good sense of how these types of medications might work. And that's what synthetic data is good for. So it has applications all over the place. In the marketing world, like you said, Brett, it's not just about Coast understanding Coast. You can then layer in receptivity to other brands. You could lay in, overall, political leanings if you wanted to, reactions to sustainability, to a whole bunch of different stuff to help you then truly understand your consumer base, your audiences, and, just people in general.
Andrew, I know you're working with Kristin and with both our Plus Intelligence, but also what we call Project Catalyst, or the brand name which is of the product, which is called AIOS, to actually use synthetic data to create customer journeys and understand, what decisions to make based on the predictive abilities of that platform. I know it's early days for you working with this, but what do you see? What's its pros and cons for you as a marketer? Where do you see its opportunities?
I am so excited about the journey that we are going on with AI, with Plus Company, and I'm excited for a couple of different reasons. The first one is I've been so impressed with the ability to match the agility and the drive that we are trying to create within our organization in terms of looking at how there are partnerships and integrations across agencies in terms of saying, how do we get to a team Coast where we are taking the best expertise across the network and really making sure that we're getting sharp on the problem statements and the solutions that we're having. And AI is, and this tool is going to be the critical component to being able to drive the value realization of all of those different components, including from the perspective of Coast, some of those investments in values, where the ROI on values has not always been as measurable as would be ideal in terms of some of those pieces. So the agility and the integration is super exciting.
I genuinely think that one of the powers of platforms like AIOS and generative AI and how it predicts and helps marketers make decisions, but also how it helps customers make decisions, is that actually companies that are doing the right things for the world and for our communities are actually going to do better. Let me ask you, Kristin, do you see other CMOs and or brands or companies as forward thinking as Coast and Andrew around these things? Who else do you look at and say, they're doing a good job?
There are some things that it feels like you can't measure, but you still do them because they're the right thing to do, like kind of in your gut. A company that does a lot of that. I mean, everyone talks about Patagonia as being the definition, obviously, of doing things the right way. But my guess is there's not a lot of they did things like close their stores over Boxing Day week to give their staff a break. There wasn't a business case for that, but my guess is it turned out to be a very good business move for them, right? And so I think there's a lot of challenges I have this conversation a lot with a lot of people. A lot of people want to make movements in that direction. A lot of those people don't have the authority or capability to make a big move in the way, say, that Patagonia does. They have people they're accountable to at different levels of the organization. And that I find is where so many of the conversations can die, because they want to do it. And they're so afraid that if they make choices that potentially lean into net zero solutions or whatever it might be, that if it hurts the bottom line, they're the ones accountable. So it's always like, I will do this as long as I know it doesn't hurt business results. Okay, challenge accepted, and now we have a solution to that within AIOS and our Catalyst system. This is where you can talk about optimizing towards KPIs like your business results, because we know we're still living in a world where the bottom line matters. But okay, how do I ensure business results while doing it in the most carbon friendly way or carbon neutral way?
Right.
So it's not an either or. It's this has to be the first thing because my business falls apart. I got nothing to do here. But okay, and now I'm going to optimize sustainability at the same time. That is going to change the entire conversation around what we're able to do. Because even if it's not perfect, meaning it's not a totally carbon neutral media plan or approach, it will be better than what it was before. And if everyone makes improvements that way, we'll go in that direction. So again, it's all a little bit of bravery though. And I think there's lots of excitement, engagement, eagerness to have a lot of these conversations. It's really hard to be the first one to do it. And this is where, Andrew, I think that does put you in a type of different category of going, all right, I'm in, let's do this. That's a big deal.
Well, and as companies like Coast Capital, as you become more successful, Andrew, it's also good because more revenue for Coast Capital will mean more spending in communities and in responsible media, et cetera. So there's a flywheel effect in this, right?
It needs to start at the top as well, where especially with AI and measurement, Kelvin, our CEO, has been a real champion of saying, what would it look like if we thought of Coast as a technology company that was grounded in the values of a cooperative as opposed to a cooperative that has to use technology? And if you take a values-based lens on tech and then say, how can that help fulfill needs for under or unbanked Canadians, it gets really interesting quickly in terms of how that pivot has helped unlock innovation that you just haven't seen in the cooperative movement over the last couple of decades. And with AI, I think we've been just so lucky in order to have a CEO that has been vocal and bullish on the technology. And so over the last 6 months, we've had board, EXCO, SLT, and org-wide education sessions with McKinsey and academic institutions and other resources in. We've already integrated it into our internal comms where we use AI within our workflows as teams. And I think most importantly, we've been really, really focused on saying, how do we empower our teams to test and leverage the technology really with 3 focuses: innovation, value realization, as well as social purpose. And in terms of finding that combination between them, where it's not just innovation for innovation's sake, it's how is that actually driving a bottom line benefit that is having a triple bottom line impact connected to the purpose, where and if we can make that happen.
Thank you for your time, for your insights. Thank you for being a great partner in Possibility, by the way. I think your willingness and vision around how AI and AIOS can help both Coast Capital, but also the world around us is really inspirational. And I, for one, have enjoyed this conversation and look forward to many, many successes in the future.
Thanks, Brad. It's been great.
Thank you for listening to Partners in Possibility. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Kristin Wozniak, SVP of Customer Success at Plus Company, and Andrew Rusk, VP Marketing at Coast Capital Savings, on how AI can not only power ROMI, but also help companies see consumers beyond their digital identity, as well as our overview of AIOS, the newest Plus Company intelligent all-in-one system for marketing. In the weeks ahead, we'll continue our conversation about the future of AI in marketing with a renowned digital economy expert. Be sure to tune in next week for part 1 of our conversation with the best-selling author, professor, and chief data scientist, Abby Goldfarb.